JD, thanks for being here.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm looking forward to our conversation today. We're going to try something a little different.
Mix it up.
Dare I say a little fun.
We'll see. We'll see about that. We'll let the audience be the judge of that.
Exactly. We'll see if we should do this again.
I get to be your test dummy for this new format you're going to try.
I prefer guinea pig.
Okay, guinea pig. I'll take that. Great.
So today, you and I are going to ask each other questions or give each other a phrase that has something to do with retirement plans.
Right.
And what we'll do is each of us will say whether this is jargon, whether it's something that's jumbled, or whether it's just flat out gibberish.
And I think it's important to define those terms, right?
Absolutely.
So and I worked very hard at my statements.
I know we both have our notes right here.
No thanks to my sales team, who I'd asked to provide me statements, which they did not. But I've got mine. I'm very excited about them. Jargon, gibberish, jumbled. Jargon will be a statement that is true, is accurate, but it's confusing because it's got a lot of industry terms, acronyms, etc. Jumbled will be a statement or a sentence where the words that are being used, the acronyms are correct, but somehow things are misplaced, right?
Absolutely.
It's just not quite all there. And gibberish is just
who knows?
Made it up.
It has nothing to do with retirement plans.
It's ridiculous. Okay, so those hopefully would be easy to isolate. We'll see.
All right. So with that, you get to call the ball. Do you want to be the first one to give a question?
I want to go first.
Okay.
I definitely want to go first. Okay. All right. Here is my tackle at this new format on the 401k Fridays podcast. My statement or sentences. Understanding the difference between R5 and R6, as well as the associated 12B1 and sub-TAs, can be very important when considering your 408B2 and 404A5 responsibilities.
I'm going to go jargon.
Absolutely, that's jargon. Everything is correct in that statement.
Yep.
Understanding the difference between R5 and R6, we're talking about share classes.
Yep.
And if you are a fiduciary or a plan sponsor or a plan advisor or anyone involved in a retirement plan, very important to understand the differences. I then go on to explain some of them that you should focus on are the 12B1 fees, which are fees, in a sense, paid to an advisor. It can be used in a variety of ways these days, but that's how it was built. Sub-TAs, which is another deeper level of fees that could be embedded within these share classes. So yes, it's very important to understand the fees. And then I finish the sentence with, when considering your 408B2, which is your fee disclosure responsibilities from vendor to plan sponsor, as well as your 404A5 responsibilities, which are fee disclosures to the participants. I'm glad you nailed it as jargon. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the 404A5 responsibilities as a subject matter. It's been around for a little while. Again, as I mentioned, it's a fee disclosure to participants. And my concern with it is how many plan sponsors are actually carrying through with this responsibility. Now, you and I work in slightly different spaces. I'm kind of in more what the industry would call the micro market, say 1 to 10 million, and you work above that. And I can tell you in the micro market, the record keepers have worked very hard at creating really neat tech tools that allow plan sponsors to create 404A5 participant disclosures basically on demand. Mm-hmm. So they can log into the website and create them, and they're very well done. Many of them are super, super impressive. But the responsibility falls on the plan sponsor to distribute these disclosures to the participants. And I have found through inquiries and questioning clients of my own, as well as prospects out there, that a lot of them are not using the tools that are provided to them, which I think is a big mistake.
Yeah, and that's
does
why
that shock you?
No, not at all. And that's what I wanted to get clarification from you on. Were you concerned that the notices aren't being prepared correctly, or that they're not being distributed, or is it both?
I'm less concerned about them being prepared correctly. I think the record keepers have done a pretty good job. And that, I'm talking about leading vendors that have put a lot of time, energy, and money into creating those things. I think they're even notifying the plan sponsors, the clients, that it is their responsibility to get this out.
Right.
And mind you, there's a lot of different ways this plays out. There are plenty of record keepers out there that handle this for the client as well. And I'm not even going near 316 fiduciary responsibilities right now. I'm just talking about in a world in the micro market where I'm a plan sponsor, my record-keeping vendor has sent me an email and notification saying, hey, you need to send this out. All I had to do was click on the link, go to the website, pull down this beautiful 404A5 participant fee disclosure, and then distribute it, but I'm not doing it. I fell asleep at the wheel.
Right.
I didn't do it. And then I think that's a huge problem. I think that this whole fee disclosure regs was like a huge turning moment for our industry to find out that a lot, I'm making up some stats here, but of plan sponsors aren't actually doing this is an issue.
Yeah, and I think notices in general are a challenge. And I think some people are pretty good about getting maybe a safe harbor notice out, but automatic enrollment, QDIA notices, fee disclosure notices, I mean, there's the list is quite long depending upon some of the buttons you've pushed on your plan design, but that, I agree, I think that is a challenge.
I think if you were to ask any of your future guests that fall into that ERISA attorney category, whether it's a bad thing or a serious matter to not be delivering these mandatory, government mandatory notices, I think they would gasp and say, heck yeah, that you have to do that. So I think it's a very big deal, and I wanted to share that with the audience. And so if you're a plan sponsor out there, or you're an advisor or industry pro, those are the kind of the little things that you need to pay closer attention to and make sure that they're happening. And that's really why I brought my statement.
I like it. Let me put one back on you real quickly. 408B2 notices.
Yeah.
So those are, as you said, the fee disclosure notices that service providers are preparing but are going to
the employer,
the fiduciary, the plan sponsor, whatever the case may be. Just in your observation, are you finding employers are understanding what they're getting? Are you finding that they're taking time to review that, or is it, thank you for the notice, or we fulfilled our responsibility by providing this to you, and it doesn't really get...
I hate for you to paint me in this kind of soapbox category again, but as I stand up on it and I look at those 408B2 notices, and again, a lot of requirements were put on them in terms of what they needed to cover, but they are extremely confusing. I don't think I've ever seen one that is simple and straightforward, but that's kind of the MO of government-mandated notices to begin with. I could make the same comment about an SPD, which is intended for a participant. If you
More jargon.
Yeah, but if you read an SPD, it's very difficult to understand. But a 408B2 disclosure, extremely difficult to understand. And what's worse about them is a lot of them are built to cover a variety of scenarios. So there's a lot of if this, then but, maybe, sometimes in those things, because they're trying to cover all their bases. And then again, just for a plan sponsor to understand a share class versus an asset-based wrap fee versus a per participant fee versus a one-time supplemental fee. I mean, it's a lot to take in.
Right.
And a 36-page 408B2, even in the hands of a professional like myself or my team, can take a lot of time and a nice thick highlighter pen and some scribbling notes to really get to the bottom of it. And if I get to the end of that 36-pager and I don't clearly understand the fees, which happens, that's not good.
Right. Yeah, that's
I should be able to get it because it's my world, and many times I cannot.
And before we move on to my first question, which
is it better than mine?
We'll see what you do with it. I don't know. It's different. Which is a good thing.
Be the judge of that.
You mentioned share classes. I know that is a big topic of conversation right now. R4, R5 share classes, I think you mentioned, which is just one of the many out there that are part of the alphabet soup of
A shares, B shares, C shares, R3s, R4s, R6s, Q shares, institutional shares, Z shares, Y shares, you name it. There's a ton.
Yeah, and there's no rhyme or reason from one firm to the other, but is that something you find that as employers are looking at their investment lineups, or if they're looking at whether it be fee disclosure notices or anything else they're being provided, is that something that people are understanding or recognizing, or is that one of those things that, again, just...
It goes right over their head, and some very intelligent people. You know, I'm not making fun or pointing or poking at them. Like, it's very intelligent people. It goes right over their head. They don't quite understand the mystery of the black box of a share class. Our industry seems to be moving towards, like, what I would call clean shares. Mm-hmm. You know, share classes that don't have a lot of these fees built in. Because let's drum it down. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the only difference between one type of share class and another, really, is fees being embedded one way or another, right?
So
for the most part.
For the most part, what's interesting, and we'll tackle this on a future episode, is there's some new technology that's emerged over the last few years with what I would call fee levelization or fund revenue equalization.
Interesting. Could be built a little differently.
And believe it or not, with some providers, we have found that there's some arbitrage to be had amongst share classes.
Yeah.
So, for example, the cheapest share class in expense might not be the cheapest net share class when you factor in all of the debits and credits. So that's a whole nother...
And you're kind of proving the original point, which is, geez, these things can even get deeper and more complicated. So it is very difficult for plan sponsors to understand. But from a general sense, when I try to help a plan sponsor understand it, I tackle it in that manner. That, hey, we're just talking about some fees built in.
Let's start from the macro.
So let's start there. You need to understand that this fund has a little extra fee built into it than this one. The audience might first go, well, why would you ever get the one that's more expensive? Well, there's reasons for that, because it's creating revenue for people that are doing jobs within the plan. And sometimes people lose sight of that. But I was saying that we're kind of moving towards these clean funds, which would really kind of eliminate all that. But we're just not there yet. We still work in an industry where there's lots of different share classes being utilized in plans of all kinds of sizes. And it is important, based on my statement, my jargon that I brought to you, that they understand the mechanics. When I say they, I mean the fiduciaries of these different funds, the difference between an R4 and an R5 and an R6. Or an A share with a front load waived, or, you know, there's so many moving pieces.
Or to throw some gibberish in there, some R2D2.
Yes, there you go. Ha ha. R2D2. I could have used that one.
All right.
It's your turn, man.
All right, buddy.
You throw me your statement, your jargon, your gibberish, or your jumbled.
So, JD, we just acquired a new company. I think we need to make our plan a MEP, or should it now be a multi-employer plan? Yes. What do you think we should do?
I believe, you're going to put me on the spot if I get this wrong, this caveat. I'm just the president of a company. You said earlier, I just write the checks or whatever. I think that's jargon, and I think that if you acquire a company, that is a decision that you could try to make. Am I correct?
Certainly jargon.
Yep. Okay, got that one.
And a little jumbled.
Oh, well, that's not fair.
Yeah, so I threw some jargon at you in a way that some people, you're absolutely right. You know, hey, if you acquire a company, depending upon how that's done, maybe you need to be a MEP.
Right.
But one of the things that I see from some of my clients, and I would love to have you kind of talk about some of these differences, is people hear the terms like multiple employer plan or MEP, and they think, well, hey, we just acquired another company and they're now going to be a division or a wholly owned subsidiary, so we're a multiple employer, and we need to be a MEP. So how do I create a MEP from my current plan?
Yeah.
Or, you know, the one I still confuse to this day is multi-employer, which again sounds a whole heck of a lot like multiple employer, but those are completely different completely different terms and terminology. So
maybe we could just quickly define.
If you can break it down.
It's a little outside of my space. You know, we don't work a lot of it, but I got decent knowledge around that. You know, a MEP is not just a bunch of different employers, you know, that are connected. It's actually a bunch of employers, and you correct me anytime I'm wrong, all on the same plan, so to speak. The same 5,500 is kind of the best way to put that. And I know there's some moving legislation or opinions or some gray area around it, but a MEP is where you've gathered together. It used to be they had to be related in some fashion, right? Like an auto dealers or some organization that all does the same thing.
Yeah, National Association of Auto Dealers is, I think, one of the largest MEPs out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the proponents of MEPs say, no, they don't have to be related. You can literally just assemble together a whole bunch of smaller employers and plans and put them into one plan, one 5500, and there can be lots of efficiencies. Again, I don't work in that space, but I understand the people that wave that flag or market that solution. The efficiencies could be one menu, one menu of funds, one core menu, one 338 solution. They're definitely pitching through gathering all the assets together, getting better pricing, right? Economies of scale.
Absolutely.
Sorry, was the word I was searching for. So they're pitching efficiencies in terms of you have all these plans kind of the same way. Although, not to knock against them, you can have some unique differences in the design of them. I don't think that's how a lot of them like to work, but it can be done that way. So that's really what a MEP is, and not to be confused with the multi-employer plan, which I'm not even going to comment on.
Yeah, exactly. No, just that the multi-employer just means union. That's
let me get TPA on you. And so your start to your statement said it acquired this company. I can't remember the exact words. So they had to be or had to choose, and that's not necessarily the case either.
Yeah.
You don't have to be part of a MEP. When you acquire a company, one, they could keep their own plan as is. Now, if you're a control group or affiliate service group, we may have to do umbrella testing, and there's definitely some discriminatory issues that need to be dealt with between the two entities, but you could keep your own plan. You may become an adopting employer on the existing document. That's a very common way to deal with an acquisition. So I get the jumbled part now. I'm a slow learner.
That's okay.
But
you got there. That was what I was looking for. So, was it just because you acquire a company, and especially if you are part of the same control group, then these MEPs or the multi-employers, this is just jargon that people get jumbled.
For sure.
But those are things that I hear from some of my clients, is that they pick up on some of these words and they're like, ooh, multiple employer or multi-employer, that really seems to apply to me now. And without knowing some of those different terminologies, sometimes they can spin their wheels or waste a lot of time thinking about stuff that doesn't really apply to them if they knew, or if they were to kind of unjumble some of that,
slow down
some of
a
that
little
jargon.
bit and make sure they understand. Since we talked about merging and acquiring companies, and your audience tends to be plan sponsors, I'm going to bring up one other point. I find out from my 401k committees a lot about the fact that they acquired a company 6 months ago.
Past tense.
Yes. And I used to yell at them and say, well, you guys have to let me know. Now, I'm learning, because these are my bigger clients, more in your space. Some of my 401k committees tell me, the guys that are buying these companies aren't telling us as the 401k committee. So I would put that out there to your audience, that I think 401k committees need to let those bigwigs know that are out there trying to acquire companies that the retirement plan can be impacted and can be a huge liability, and that there should be some counsel involved before you acquire that company as it relates to the plan they have in place. And I'm sure you've tackled that subject matter on past episodes, but get some counsel. Measure twice before you cut when it comes to acquiring companies with 401k plans or retirement plans, because you may be taking on their dirty laundry, and you also may be setting yourself up for a far more complicated fix down the line, where if you planned ahead, you can make it a little more seamless and smooth. Cool?
Agree.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go to my next one. This one's a little simpler. Let's see if you can catch it. And I'm using some acronyms. A TDF and a GIC, or a GIC, are great solutions for a plan's QDIA. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
So let me make sure I heard you right. A TDF and a GIC?
Yes.
Okay.
You're on to it since he's asking me to clarify and. Yes, and.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to go jumbled.
Yes. Jumbled.
And so I'll pick through this and kind of work through this in the way that I would I would work a problem
We'll
here.
have to work that out because much like you, I put jumbled / gibberish, so we
Yeah.
kind of need to
All right.
define that, or you will as you have future guests.
I like it. I like
Yes,
it.
jumbled.
So TDF, target date fund. GIC, guaranteed interest contract.
Yep.
QDIA, meaning qualified default investment alternative. And
Ding, ding, ding.
yep. So where we're going with this is, or I think you're going with this,
Are
is,
they both great solutions for a plan's QDIA?
So under the new QDIA regs, a TDF or target date fund would qualify as a
Correct.
qualified default investment
I
alternative.
didn't realize this was going to turn into more like a quiz, but I like it. And you're getting it all right.
All right.
Yeah.
So the benefit of a QDIA or qualified default investment alternative is that the fiduciaries get a little added protection for people that are defaulted or placed into that investment without their explicit consent, and hence they are defaulted.
Yeah.
So
Which used to be a very scary
concept.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, we're going to automatically put these people into investment. Surely there's a lot of liability that goes along with that.
Yeah, and to your point, a lot of people used to use
Yes, back in the
GICs,
days.
or they would use
Money
a money market
markets,
account.
cash equivalents.
Yeah, something like that. So a GIC or a guaranteed investment contract is going to be a cash equivalent within our defined contribution 401k world.
I would argue that through the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, that was probably the more common.
That was the default,
right?
Yeah, and I mean, when I first came into the industry, there were no QDIA regs, and when we were doing plan conversions or moving people from one vendor to another, or removing an investment that didn't have a great equivalent in a particular investment lineup, the answer was put them in cash because we don't want we don't want the liability that, hey, the market crashed while we were in the middle of a plan conversion and people lost all this money or whatever it is when they had no access to their dollars and we didn't know how to map it. And
Seems safe.
Exactly. And now, to your point, I think what's interesting is that only the target date fund qualifies under the QDIA regulations. So a GIC or a GIC is not eligible under a QDIA, and you would also need to choose one of those as your QDIA. You couldn't have both.
Right. So you got it. You nailed it. The GIC is not supposed to be in there. That is not an appropriate QDIA per the rules. Let's expand on that a little bit for our audience. Why not? Because we were just talking, and I even got warm and fuzzy, like, oh yeah, cash seems like a nice, safe place to be. But why they came out with these rules now is like, no, it's really not. Because if I'm a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 45-year-old and you default me into cash, I'm basically not even keeping up with inflation, especially the rates of return that cash equivalents have these days, which are very, very low compared to the past. But I'm not keeping up with inflation. It is not an appropriate asset allocation, if I could even use that word or that definition. So it's almost liable. There's a liability for you as the decision maker, the fiduciary, the plan sponsor that put me into that. I could come back. What if I left it in there for 20 years and I come back to you at the end of my retirement and go, why is my account balance so low? Like I've been in, oh, well, you've been in cash for the last 20 years. That's the default we put you into. That's a potential lawsuit, I think. Like,
yeah, no, could absolutely be, and I think that one of the things that a lot of people in our industry agree upon, and I think it's tough to find things that a lot of people agree upon, is that the Pension Protection Act of 2006, which created the concept of a QDIA and gave people a fiduciary blessed option where they can say, all right,
safe harbor, if you will.
Yeah, we're going to give you protection.
Not to be confused with the other safe harbor.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
So see, there could be a round two here, which gives people an opportunity to say, all right, JD, I'm with you. I don't think it makes sense for my participants to be in cash, but I don't have any protection to do anything else. That's really what those QDIA regulations solved, is you can now place people in a target date fund, a balanced fund, a managed account, and receive fiduciary protection as long as you're selecting and monitoring that investment appropriately.
And delivering the notices. And
yeah, coming back to your point, yeah, delivering notices and everything else.
Earlier.
Yeah. And that was a huge step forward for people, but you are right. I mean, we still see and have conversations with plan sponsors, either who, believe it or not, have not declared a QDIA or have not selected an investment, or
fight
again,
it maybe.
Yeah,
feel like, oh no, cash should be where to go.
Yeah, or are still using cash as their default. Not a QDIA, but you have to list a default in your plan. And we've actually run into a few plan sponsors over the last couple of years that are still using cash despite all of the.
Well, can we wrap this subject by, I wanted to add this. It's going to be shocking to a lot of people out there, but you don't have to have a QDIA.
No. Yeah, it's voluntary.
It's not a requirement. And
you don't have to have a 401k.
Well, fair enough. But I just mean people really do get that one wrong.
Yeah.
I have tons of advisors that come to me feeling like a QDIA is an absolute requirement. You could call it a necessity or something that you should utilize, but it is not a legal requirement to have a QDIA. You can, and a default fund doesn't necessarily have to be a QDIA either, as you just mentioned. It could just be a default. Now, you lose the protection, you lose everything that was given to you by the Pension Protection Act, but it's not something you have to do.
Yeah, great point.
Okay.
All right. Did we work that problem to the stub there?
But I think that works. I like that if I can say it out loud. Bring the statement, and then it opens up a conversation, and I think that was a good conversation on it.
I love it.
Your turn. Don't make me look bad.
All right. I'm trying to think
People already look at me.
I'm trying to think about where I want to go
here. How'd you get this homeless guy on stage? Don't make me look. Make me look smart. I'm kidding. Bring it. I don't mind being wrong. It's totally okay.
All right. So JD, I'm worried about failing our top-heavy test. So should we start using automatic enrollment?
Great. So that is, I'm going to call that jumbled. I'm still struggling with jumbled versus gibberish. This is a.
I've got a good gibberish one for you in a minute. So we'll clearly define gibberish in a second.
Just so you know, I have one. I have one that I defined as just funny. So we'll throw that one at you later. I didn't really fall into any of those categories. This is very common. So we should stop for a second, take a breath, and soak this one in. I cannot tell you how many times people misinterpret top-heavy versus a failed ADP test. So much so that my sales team is actually trained to interpret top-heavy problems from an advisor or a client as this is potentially a failed ADP test. Yeah. So let's define the two because they're very, very different.
And to your point, I'm glad you're saying that because some plan sponsors, when they use very specific words like top-heavy, it sends someone like yourself who is in the business of administering plans, you're going down
I could run off down the
you're going down
path.
One total rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And when they mean, but they mean something completely else. And sometimes you can waste 20, 30 minutes on a call just trying to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
I think what you're saying, Mr. Unser, is that this jargon, gibberish, and jumbled is actually important. It's important to understand and not head down the wrong path because you've got something misunderstood.
And maybe I should save this for the wrap up, but hey, it makes sense to say now. I think it's important for, well, I'll backtrack on that one slightly. I think it's good for employers to know that there are some very specific words in our industry that mean very different things, but on the surface can sound the same.
Well, and I will back you up by saying I think it's the responsibility of the professionals involved to translate and interpret and understand.
And I think, and that was kind of where I was going with the second part of that is, I think we as professionals need to make sure that we understand that
we've seen the pitfalls before. We know that they're misinterpreting something. We need to anticipate it.
And not necessarily take everything at face value.
Yeah, you got it.
So if someone says top heavy, don't automatically assume that all the stuff you're going to go through here.
Yeah.
Let's have a little dialogue before we go down a rabbit hole and somebody goes, what?
Because so just to give the audience some color or some flavor, like when I hear top heavy, my hairs jump up on my arm, like, because that can be a very, very serious scenario. Not that a failed ADP test isn't, but top heavy is when the key employees, and again, here we go.
Here we go.
Not your HCs, not your highly compensated employees, although one could be the same, but your key employees, which is an entirely different definition. These are your owners and your highly comped, your officers making above a certain number. Don't ask me, ask my sales team. But your key employees. Now, come to the end of a plan year. Let's call it 12/31. If your key employees have 60% or more of the total plan assets, your plan is top heavy. And what the government is saying is these big dogs, these important people have been taking such advantage of the plan. They've accumulated such wealth that it's too much when compared to the rank and file, to the non-key employees. And once you've crossed that line, the government says, whoa, 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 you're top heavy. And now we've got some rules for you, some things you need to do, which can be very scary. They could mean giving, massive contributions to the staff. It could mean holding off your key employees from putting in future contributions. Many times, not to go too deep on this, but top heavy is found out after the case. Yep. Things have already gone awry, and it's too late, and you've already made mistakes. So top heavy, I guess my point is, can be a very serious, like, uh-oh, we have to fix something kind of moment. So if you call me on the phone and say my plan's top heavy, I'm like, oh, geez, something's really wrong here. What they're meaning is that their plan failed the ADP test. So failing the ADP test is entirely different. That's taking your highly compensated employees, your HCEs, and comparing that with your NHCEs, your non-highly comped employees, in a period of a plan year, and looking at their deferrals versus their deferrals, and we're only allowed certain gaps. And let's just think of it as a 2% gap as a simple example. It's a little more complicated than that, like a lot of things. But so if your HCs are doing 5% and your NHCs are doing 2% of their own salary deferrals, as a whole, the two groups, the average, then you fail this ADP test. And you can fix that test through either corrective distributions, more fancy terms, or contributions to the non-highlies to kind of bring that test back into balance. Again, what are all these rules for? To make sure that those big dogs, as I referred to them earlier, are not taking too much advantage of the plan when compared to the rank and file people, okay? So again, two entirely different situations that many times get confused, because I'll agree with the people who get them messed up. Top heavy sounds like a pretty darn good word for a failed ADP test.
Absolutely.
Makes a lot of sense. We're top heavy. The big people have done more than the little people. It totally makes sense. It should be called that. That's a great name for it, but it's not. And they're very, very different.
All right, and one finer point there that you made that I'd love to just get a quick highlight of. You made mention of a key employee versus an HCE. Yep. And again, the very different. I think you kind of gave a high level explanation. One is officers, owners, income of a certain level, whereas the ADP is, or excuse me, the HCE is
just comp and ownership.
Comp and ownership. So one thing that I struggle to define for plan sponsors is, let's say you've got a large company, 300 people. You have a lot of officers at that company.
Sure.
You have a vice president of manufacturing. You have a vice president of marketing. Do those people rise to the officer definition under a top heavy, or is it truly officers as in the president of the corporation, the secretary of the corporation, the whatever, truly officers of a corporation versus maybe just you have an officer title?
To me, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the latter, and it's also tied to comp, right, as well. So it's not an or, it's an and, right? You have to have both those things. Yeah. And the definitions are out there, but no, it's your CFOs, it's your CEOs, it's your presidents, it's your. To be honest with you, I don't know how far down that goes to. You probably do because you work in that bigger space.
Yeah, so I've always that's one that I've always struggled with. Like, how do you tell someone who's charged with filling out a year-end census report on like who their key employees are? When you've got all these different people running around, like where does that definition of officer come in?
If we drug in one of my people from my office, they could tell you in black and white which one it is, and they deal with it on a day-to-day basis. But
we can take that as I'll send that as a follow-up.
Yeah. Well, and if you work in the video space like me, I just task that to my editor, and he'll throw up the definition right here.
Right on the screen. I love
it. But no, I think to circle back, that's a big one that happens a lot. Yeah. And obviously why you had it on your list when you're forcing me to now scratch one off my list, because I tackled the same thing, because it's so common. Yep. The misinterpreting top heavy versus failed ADP.
So we didn't share these questions with each other ahead of time, and apparently the person charged with comparing them.
That's all right. I got others. I got backups.
All right.
Sent it to me last night.
Yeah, fair enough. I sent it to him last night. Okay, so I am going to go with this one. I like this one. Again, my default was to go to kind of acronyms, so I apologize if I'm not being more creative. The QACA at the TPA didn't file the 8955 SSA for terminated NHCEs, so the CFP wants an ERISA JD to get a DFVC. Come on.
That one's awesome.
Can you handle all that?
That takes the cake. Oh, I think I followed about 70%.
Okay.
So I don't think I got all of it.
Do you want it one more time?
Well, let me try to work it back to you, and you let me know
Okay.
where I go off course. So QACA is a industry designation.
Got it.
That is, I don't remember the exact name or what it stands
Here's why,
for, but it's something that along the lines that you've taken certain classes and reached a certain level of
Correct.
Minimum standards
It would
around
be
plan
appropriate to have a QACA at a TPA.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
That's better said. TPA meaning third-party administrator. So
Yeah.
your firm and like others that people probably talk to, they're tasked with administering plans, plan documents, discrimination testing, 5500 preparation, helping with
sexy
compliance,
stuff.
all the fun important stuff, scrubbing data.
Yeah, all the sexy, attractive stuff, that's what TPAs do.
Okay, QACA, TPA. So now I'm
Didn't file the 8955 SSA for the terminated NHCEs.
Yeah, that one I'm going to need a little help on. So that, if I remember, that is something that gets attached to the 5500.
Yep, correct.
For, is it terminated employees that took distributions?
Terminated employees that have a balance.
Just
You're
have a
close
balance.
Enough.
Okay.
So sorry for putting you on the quiz
It's okay.
show again.
I'm all good.
So that part of the sentence is
I've
accurate.
certainly turnabout's fair play.
An 8955 SA is definitely something that you file like 5500 with
Yep.
it. It's basically telling the government, hey, these are terminated participants that have an account balance in our plan. Okay,
Yep.
They've left us, but they still have money in the plan, and you file it annually, but you only file it once for the person. So if Tom Smith has it in 2017 and then continues to have it in 2018, 2019, you don't continue to include Tom on the filing. It's just
Got
one
it.
time. So my understanding is the government's just trying to do a little bit of auditing. They're trying to have a paper trail. They're trying to understand who had money where, which is really what you're doing when you file your taxes or file a 5500. You're kind of saying, hey, here I am in California and this is what we did, you know. So,
And very appropriate as we start moving into audit season here on retirement plans. Okay.
so that is correct. So far you're good to go.
All right.
So the CFP wants an ERISA JD to get a DFVC.
Okay. So the CFP being a designation that an advisor or consultant might earn around investments, financial planning,
Another
et cetera.
designation.
Another designation.
But an accurate one.
And then an ERISA JD would be an attorney who specializes in ERISA legal matters
Yeah.
or ERISA compliance
That's why my
matters.
father named me JD. No,
I like
I'm
it.
kidding.
Oh, that would have been a great part of the story
I'm
there.
going to start using that.
And then a DFVCP.
DFVC. That's what I was given here. And I'm not trying to trick anyone up.
All right.
Is that the appropriate acronym? I think
So that one may or may not be right. So if a DF, so that to me that means delinquent filer voluntary correction.
yeah. Maybe
So
there's
that
more to
may,
it.
I don't know, maybe that is used or maybe that isn't used for that particular error or
No,
issue.
I'm not trying to trick you up here.
Okay.
Just threw a lot of jargon at you.
No, I loved it.
Yeah.
No, that was.
So we could break it down.
But yeah, to your point, all legitimate acronyms, not
Yes,
not
yes.
unacronyms, acronyms.
The best I could do, yeah.
Yeah, all legitimate acronyms. All of it made sense in that it all flowed in a logical path, and then.
Yeah. And there's two things that I wanted to kind of carry this conversation out, or one for sure. I talk a bit about it, an ERISA attorney, ERISA JD, and I think that in my world, that role gets overlooked a lot. I think they play a pretty prominent role in the larger space.
It depends. Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think it should. I would like to see, and I'm always working with my team I would like to see their involvement a lot more with clients, and I'd love to see them involved. They're always brought in when something goes horribly wrong. Okay, when something's very, very, very bad, let's call an ERISA attorney to get this stuff squared away. But I like to see them in more proactive roles. And if you work with them and you engage them and you retain their services, they can work with you to make decisions ahead of time and keep you out of that hot water. And so the more complex things get, you know, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, especially when you're acquiring companies, get an ERISA counsel, get someone that you can bend their ear and can kind of look over what you're up to and what you're doing. You know, I think that's a huge value that gets overlooked a lot in the space. And so that's when I just wanted to, that was my little niche I wanted to bring to it.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second.
Please don't.
I agree. I do think that ERISA attorneys, especially good ones that have a good bedside manner and can speak English and do a lot of what we are doing here today, which is take some of this crazy stuff and then translate it into speak that employers can understand. Not that employers aren't smart, but just this is not their world.
A lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces. I mean, I was just thinking, I mean, talk about the calls that some of these ERISA attorneys must get, you know, oh my gosh, my, you know, top-heavy test to this, and it could be something completely different. So anyways, the point I was trying to make there being, and me putting you on the spot was, as a lot of people are very concerned about cost, expense, attorneys are certainly not cheap.
Yeah.
Is there a way, or have you seen employers have an effective partnership with an attorney, not only from a value, but also from a cost perspective, where they've been able to keep them in the mix, but not be just writing checks every single month or quarter?
Let me kind of give you a real life flow on that. I think, not to toot our own horn as a TPA, but you could do the same with a qualified retirement plan advisor. If you have a good team in place, then they can kind of be the go-between this ERISA counsel. And so you don't have to necessarily pay huge money to bring the ERISA attorney in to look at things. You can use your closely held team that's already working for you to kind of break things down, and you only bring in the ERISA attorney when it's necessary to get some clarity. But also, believe it or not, we as a TPA, we have attorneys that we deal with for our clients when the problems are very big. And then we also have others that are on a far lower pay rate that we work with smaller clients to handle much smaller, less serious issues. So there are more affordable ERISA attorneys that, in what I'm saying here, have been vetted by the people that you're already working with, your TPA or your advisor, that can come in and help with a smaller problem for a lesser fee. And many times they've even built templates and tools and FAQs and things that kind of help you along. So no, I do think that on the one hand, there can be very expensive ERISA attorneys, and I think that they're very valuable, and I think that especially as your plan gets a little bigger, you should know who they are and you should utilize them when you can. And sometimes it's better to spend a little bit of money to feel safe and secure and have some type of good counsel as opposed to dealing with some nightmare in the future. But for a smaller, more frugal entity, there are also, dare I call them, ERISA attorney light kind of solutions where you can get some help but not really crush your wallet, the way you might think. So there's some options, is what I'm trying to say. But get counsel. It's okay to get counsel because these are serious things. And I don't want to go, too down a rabbit hole here, but I want plan sponsors to take these plans very seriously. And I want them to understand that a mistake could cost them down the line. I'm a small business owner. I have just over 20 employees, so it's very mom and pop. If you come to me with an unknown cost 6 months from now, 12 months from now, and you put it in the, six-figure number or something, it could wreck me. It could be a very disappointing day in my business life to have to deal with that. And so if I can pay, it's kind of like insurance. If I can pay a little bit every month to make sure I've got the right team and pay a little extra, as I'm talking about, make sure I'm prepared and safe and I'm going to avoid that day, I think that's money well spent. my business does really well. There are a lot of other small companies where if you came to them with a $50,000 bogey or a $30,000 bogey, it could turn their lights off.
Yeah.
I know this isn't your space, but you take a $1 million plan with 10 employees and tell them, hey, you owe 75 grand to fix this mistake you made from 2 years ago, and they're like, we can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, so serious stuff. Get help. Make sure you're getting the right kind of support.
All right. Well said. All right. My turn?
Yeah.
I think it's my turn. All right. So, JD, I was just at a seminar in the OC and heard that Run DMC could help with our ADP.
So, unless I don't understand the credentials and skill sets of Run DMC, but I wouldn't put it past them, that is gibberish. Great fun. I think my joke's going to be funnier than yours, so
okay.
we'll see what
You're better at that.
But no, that's good. That was very good.
You're better at that
OC being Orange County, Run DMC being the awesome rap group from the 80s, and no, they can't help with, what were you tasking them to help with?
ADP.
The ADP test. Although
we beat that one to death already. But
yes, we've done that. So that is gibberish for sure. Part of me wants to start talking about Run DMC now. Do I get on there? I don't know if I have a ton of knowledge base. I think they're one of the first rap groups to kind of cross over into the rock and roll with Aerosmith.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
I remember a video of them crashing through the brick wall and Steven Tyler, Walk This Way, getting it. That was pretty cool, Run DMC. There you go.
There you go. I think that's what we needed to say about that one.
Okay.
All right.
I am gonna go to, since you just went comedy, I'm gonna go.
I tried comedy. It didn't go so well.
I'm gonna go with my comedy.
All right.
See how you like it.
Okay.
My ex-wife, I'm happily married, by the way, with 3 kids, but in theory, my ex-wife had me in this Quadro fund, QDRO fund. It didn't perform very well, and I lost half my money. Is that good? That's good. Boom.
That is good.
Do the video. I need the comedy thing.
But I mean, that's jumbled too.
Sort
right?
of.
I mean, because that's at least a.
Fair enough.
I mean, I can connect those dots
There's
a little
some
bit.
connections there.
So Quadro, and again, you correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah.
Qualified domestic relations order.
Perfect.
Is something that would make sense if there was a ex-wife, and again, Tracy, love her.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I can see how X and Quadro, that would fit together.
How about the didn't perform well?
Yeah,
I mean,
there is no Quadro fund.
No.
So a Quadro, we're having this, we're having a fun time with this one on a client. Yeah, but a Quadro is basically just a way that an account can be set up within a workplace retirement plan, 401k, 403b, whatever, for someone who has received a court order, that half or whatever portion of an account needs to be distributed and segregated for an ex-spouse.
And living in California, half makes a lot of sense. I haven't been through the process, but yeah, so they're going to take half. So you've got this court ordered.
Yep.
We actually, as a TPA, process these all the time, where it's pretty simple. Think of a married couple, and they've built up this 401k. Now, unfortunately, they get divorced, and the wife and/or the husband is coming to get their portion of the 401k ordered by the court. I didn't create this statement, Brandon did, but I thought it was hilarious when he said it, because it didn't perform that well. You lost half your money, man. So, but that's what's happening, and it's very, very common. I'm not going to get into a ton of the legal aspects of it.
But that is one, coming back to the ERISA attorney thing, Quadros are certainly one where having an outside attorney involved.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And now we're kind of maybe bleeding off into like divorce negotiations, which I know nothing about, but you're really divvying up assets, right? When you're getting divorced and coming to some type of agreement, hopefully. And that could mean the house, and you could trade the house for the 401k or the cars for this, or what have you. But many times in the end, that couple has built up this 401k and they want to split it up the way they're supposed to, and that Quadro is gonna help you do that. But anyways.
And then just I guess the final point on that one would be that there is no Quadro investment.
No, it's not a fund.
Yeah, it's not a fund. So it's
looks like a
something
ticker,
that, yeah, it does. It does
not.
look like a ticker, but it is basically that money is going to be placed into the 401k and then invested in either a default fund or some other strategy that the document's laid out for how money would need to be treated that comes in from a Quadro. And that could lose half its value, maybe.
Well, yeah.
Could, but it would be not by fault of the Quadro, but by fault of whatever investment was designated as part of that.
Fair enough, fair enough. But yeah, that was my attempt at 401k humor.
I liked it.
401k humor is not easy, by the way.
It's really
coming up with that stuff. Brandon made another comment that if I'm ever asked to come back to do this, what I need to do is just go to my home office and sit on a chair in the middle of my office and listen to all the people working. And he thinks I'll come up with all kinds of creative jargon, gibberish, or jumbled, because it's happening every day in the middle of a TPA shop. So.
I mean, that's part of what I've always say, our role is to try to take all this and put it into English. Yeah. Because on the surface, it's not easy.
All right, I went first.
All right.
So you're going to go last.
All right. So this is my last one.
Jargon, gibberish, or jumbled.
Man, and I feel like we hit on some of these, but if nothing else, it'll be we can close it out with this. So we just hired a 338 to manage our QDIA, which has high participation due to our QACA.
I think that's jargon. Nothing seems wrong with that.
No. All legit.
Yeah, so all that seems very, very legit. You added, I don't know if we discussed a lot about 338, so you added that, but a 338, I'm going to take your approach. You just kind of break it down as we go. That was pretty good.
I'm a linear guy.
I like that. So the 338 is a type of fiduciary role, common for an advisor to take that role where they're dealing with the investments, choosing the investments for the plan sponsor, taking on that responsibility to pick them, monitor them, replace them if so be it. One of those investments would definitely be the QDIA, which I think was part of your sentence. So that would fall to the 338 to make that decision. And then you're saying that QDIA, that fund, that investment option, if you will, has, I can't remember your exact words, but has gotten a lot of money into it.
Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of money in it.
A lot of flow into that fund because of the QACA, which you're referring to some duck or something. I don't know what that is. No, that's a qualified automatic contribution arrangement.
I believe so.
Please tell me I got that right.
I think you're good there.
I have really smart people that work for me that will nail those down every time. And that is the third form of a safe harbor that came along. You've got your non-elective safe harbor. You got your what I call a 4% match safe harbor, and now you've got this QACA, which is taking a safe harbor matching contribution schedule, adding to it an automatic enrollment and an automatic escalation concept to it, or template, if you will, and it's called a QACA, as funny as it sounds. And so because it has an automatic enrollment feature to it, yes, it would push more money into that QDIA investment that was selected by the 338 fiduciary advisor.
And you bring it all home.
Whew. Yeah, so that is jargon for sure, and accurate. A good little takeaway on that is a QACA safe harbor is definitely an option for plan sponsors. It's probably one that gets overlooked more than the others, and it can be a really cool, really appropriate, neat solution in a lot of scenarios. Maybe because of its, and again, I speak from a micro market space versus you, but maybe because of its complexities, it's centered around automatic enrollment and an automatic increase. Maybe that seems like too much for some people, but it can be a really good design, and I would say, without sounding cliche, like one that should be considered, should be looked at, right?
Yep, and I think, and there's two things that I think are good takeaways about a QACA, QACA, whatever you want to call it.
QACA's way better.
I think you're right. It does sound more like a duck that way. One of the things I like about it for certain organizations is it is the only safe harbor that comes with the ability to use a 2-year vesting schedule.
Yep.
So that's one thing I know. Certainly the finance side of the house is generally interested to hear about.
If you got some turnover, could be a big deal because the other two safe harbors are immediate 100% vested.
Yep.
Or the QACA, however you want to pronounce it, allows you to have that 2-year vesting. Could be huge.
Yep.
Could be huge.
The second part I will say is that I do think there should be a warning label on QACAs because there are so many moving parts to it. The automatic enrollment, the automatic increase, if you have a lot of rehires, if you have a lot of turnover in your business, even if you don't.
I'd like to see two things. I'd like to see, if you're going to choose a QACA, I'd like to see a very responsible HR staff.
Yeah.
I want someone at the steering wheel, someone at the helm that gets it, understands it, is in there day in and day out, and so because they can play a heavy role. I also want to see a record keeper that's chosen that has the tech, the notifications, the systems built to assist that HR or HR team. Because you're right, too many people say, great idea, let's do it, but then no one's at the wheel.
Yeah.
And then the thing goes awry, and that's not good.
And we've had the unfortunate privilege of being
part
of a few plans that have gone awry on issues like that, and it is like pulling on a string. You keep pulling, and the more you pull, the more
Let's
you
not
find.
take it lightly. In this business, if you tell a participant that you're going to automatically enroll them, and you're going to automatically increase their enrollment each year, and they got that notice, and they basically make the decision to not do anything because they've read it and agree to those terms, you're on the hook.
Yeah, you can owe them a lot of money.
You told them you're going to do that. If you don't do that, then you're responsible for that. So it shouldn't be taken lightly. Like, it can be a very messy, very costly fix.
Yep.
So yeah, I think as we wrap, that's really is the moral of the story you had mentioned earlier, or the moral of the concept today, is that try to make sure that you understand the terms. Try not to head down a path without making sure that you understand the terms. Try to make sure that the people around you, your professionals, are helping you understand the terms and or blocking and tackling for you. And I guess I could say just measure twice before you cut, because there can be some very complicated, you talked about the yarn, problems that happen if you're not acting properly.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I would say to employers, it's a complicated business. Well, I hope that people you're dealing with understand that. And as an employer, if you don't know the definition of a term or you're not 100% sure if something applies, it's perfectly fine to say, you know what, I'm not sure this is right, but here's a concern I have. I might not be using the right words. I might not have this framed up exactly correctly, but can you help me work through this concern? And I think that will disarm people in a lot of ways, in that you're not thinking you have it exactly figured out. Your service providers and your partners that you're working with can take a minute to explore things a little bit more, rather than feeling like they have to respond to a very specific question using very specific words, which triggers a very specific response in their mind, which might not have anything to do with the question you asked.
It is, you said it, and I wish it was different, but it is, as a TPA, especially I feel this pain, it is very complicated. We've said it ad nauseum here. There's lots of moving pieces, and that's just the cold, hard facts. It is. I wish we were making surfboards or T-shirts at my shop. It'd be so much stress-free, so much more stress-free. But it is very complicated. And so it is absolutely crucial that a lot of people don't want to hear this, but that you have a thirst, even as a plan sponsor, to be a sponge and kind of start to learn this a little more. But then equally as important as that, make sure that the people that you've hired have your back.
Yep.
Make sure that you have someone that really knows this stuff, because they're going to be your best tool to understand it all and to make educated decisions that you can feel confident about, that you're not heading down the wrong path. Find that professional, and I'm not trying to, it's not some sales pitch. I'm not suggesting that it be me or that it be you. I'm just saying, when you're out there in the world in these 50 states and you're dealing with a 401k plan, make sure you get someone that you feel good about, that really, really knows this stuff and that you can count on.
Yep. I agree. And ask questions early. When in doubt, ask. Don't
keep asking.
Yeah, keep asking.
Keep asking. And if you do get divorced, don't put your money in the Quadro fund, because you're going to lose half of that stuff, and that's not good. How about just don't get divorced?
Yeah,
Talk
there you
to
go.
your wife. Communicate, man. Spend some time together. No,
Yeah. And don't expect Run DMC to help you with your ADP test either.
No.
Well, JD, thanks for taking the time. I
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
And we'll definitely do this again in some way, shape, or form.
401k Fridays. Happy to be here. Don't forget to check out Retireholics.
Absolutely.
Retireholics.com. See ya.
Thank you, sir.